Welcome to today's episode on the science of the brain. This is a slow journey into the most familiar and unfamiliar place you carry with you every day. If you are listening to this at night, you can allow yourself to lie down or settle into whatever position feels comfortable right now. There is nothing you need to do, nothing you need to remember. Just let the words arrive, one by one, as we begin. Tonight, we are not trying to learn the brain in a rushed or demanding way. We are simply getting to know it. Like meeting a place you have lived in your entire life, but never really walked through slowly. You have a brain that has been with you since before you had memories, before language, before you knew what a thought was. It has been quietly working in the background of every moment you have ever experienced. When people hear the word brain, they often imagine something complicated, something technical, something reserved for doctors or scientists. But the brain is also something deeply personal. It holds your habits, your fears, your curiosity, your sense of time. It shapes how you feel at night when the world becomes quieter. Tonight, we will begin by gently mapping the brain, not in sharp lines or diagrams, but as a story of layers built slowly over time. The human brain is not one single invention. It is a collection of additions, new systems built on top of older ones, solutions layered over millions of years. If you could peel the brain back, layer by layer, you would not find a clean design. You would find history. The oldest parts of your brain are ancient. They existed long before humans did, long before cities, language, or even mammals. These parts do not care about your plans or your worries. They care about survival, breathing, heartbeat, balance, temperature. They work without asking you for permission. They continue whether you are awake, dreaming, or deeply asleep. Above these older structures, newer regions slowly appeared, each one adding something different: memory, emotion, movement, social connection, planning, imagination. The brain did not replace itself as it evolved. It stacked itself. That is why sometimes you feel calm and rational, and other times reactive and emotional. Different layers speak at different moments. As night approaches, this layering becomes more noticeable. Some parts of the brain grow quieter. Others remain active, softly humming in the background. You may have noticed this before. How at night, logic feels slightly less sharp, but memories feel closer. Emotions feel nearer. Time feels different. This is not weakness. It is design. The brain was never meant to stay in one mode forever. It was meant to shift, to cycle, to alternate between attention and restoration. Tonight, as we begin this journey, we are not diving deep yet. We are simply laying out the landscape. At the very base of the brain sits the brainstem. This is the foundation. It connects the brain to the spinal cord. It manages the rhythms that keep you alive. Above that, nestled like a quiet bridge, are systems that regulate alertness and rest. They decide whether you are awake, drowsy, or drifting. Moving upward, the brain opens into wider structures, areas involved in movement, sensation, and coordination. Places that help you walk without thinking, reach without calculating, maintain balance without effort. Deeper inside, protected and central, lie structures tied to emotion and memory. This is where experiences are colored with feeling, where moments become meaningful, where memories are shaped, stored, and softened over time. And then, wrapping around much of the brain, is the outer layer, the cerebral cortex. This is the newest part in evolutionary terms, the part most associated with reasoning, planning, self-control, and identity. This outer layer is often very active during the day. It manages schedules, social rules, future possibilities, self-evaluation. At night, it grows tired. That tiredness is not failure. It is a signal that the brain is ready to shift responsibility to older, quieter systems. As you lie there now, your brain is already doing this. Even if you feel awake, even if thoughts are still drifting, the brain does not shut down suddenly. It transitions. That transition is what this series is about. Before we go deeper into each specific part in later episodes, it helps to understand one simple idea. The brain is not a single voice. It is a conversation. Different parts speak at different times. Some are loud during stress. Some whisper during rest. Some only appear when the world grows quiet. At night, the conversation changes tone. The parts responsible for vigilance begin to loosen. The parts responsible for reflection and memory step forward. This is why night thinking feels different, why thoughts feel slower but also deeper, why memories surface without effort. You are not becoming less intelligent at night. You are becoming less filtered. The brain is allowing itself to wander because wandering has a purpose. Throughout human history, night was a time of vulnerability, but it was also a time of internal processing. When external demands dropped, internal organization could begin. Even now, in modern rooms with artificial light and constant stimulation, the brain still carries that ancient rhythm. As the environment quiets, the brain turns inward. Tonight, you are simply listening to that inward turn. In future parts of this journey, we will explore each major region in detail. We will talk about the medulla oblongata and why it never sleeps. We will explore the limbic system and why emotions feel louder in the dark. We will spend time with the prefrontal cortex and understand why it needs rest from control. But for now, it is enough to know that your brain is layered, that it evolved slowly, that it knows how to rest, even if you feel like you do not. You do not need to force sleep. The brain already understands the path. Sometimes, simply understanding what is happening is enough to let it unfold naturally. As you continue listening, or even if you stop listening, your brain will keep doing what it has always done. Sorting, filtering, softening. If this exploration feels helpful to you, you can gently support this journey by liking the episode or subscribing, so these quiet stories continue to find you when you need them. There is no rush, just a small signal when it feels right. For now, let the idea settle that your brain is not fighting you at night. It is guiding you through a transition it has practiced for millions of years. And this is only the beginning. As you continue listening, nothing needs to change around you. Your body can remain exactly as it is. We are simply continuing our slow journey, moving deeper into the brain, one layer at a time. Tonight, we turn our attention to the oldest part of the brain, the part that does not think in words, the part that does not care about plans, worries, or expectations, the part that existed long before thoughts ever did. This is the brainstem, and within it, a small but powerful structure called the medulla oblongata. If the brain were a house, the medulla would not be the furniture or the decorations. It would be the foundation. Quiet, unseen, essential. You rarely think about the medulla oblongata. Most people never do. And that is exactly the point. Its job is to work without being noticed. Right now, as you listen, it is regulating your breathing. It is maintaining your heartbeat. It is controlling blood pressure. It is coordinating swallowing, coughing, and basic reflexes. It does all of this without asking for your attention, even when your thoughts drift, even when consciousness fades, even when you are deeply asleep. This part of the brain never truly rests. To understand why, we need to travel very far back in time, long before humans existed, long before mammals, long before anything that looked like a brain as we know it. There were simple organisms. They did not think. They did not plan. They reacted. Light, dark, warmth, cold, danger, safety. Survival depended on immediate response. The earliest nervous systems were not built for reflection. They were built for rhythm. Breathe, move, respond. Over millions of years, these systems became more refined. Clusters of neurons formed pathways. Pathways formed structures. Structures formed the earliest versions of the brainstem. The medulla oblongata emerged as a control center for life-sustaining rhythms. It learned to synchronize breathing with movement, heartbeat with oxygen demand, reflexes with sudden changes in the environment. This is why the medulla feels so automatic, because it is. You cannot tell your medulla to stop working, and you cannot ask it to work harder. It operates below intention. This is also why sleep is possible at all. When you fall asleep, consciousness fades, but breathing does not stop. Your heart does not forget its rhythm. Your blood continues to circulate. The medulla holds the line. At night, when higher brain regions relax their grip, the medulla remains steady, reliable, unemotional, unconcerned. This is deeply comforting, even if you are not aware of it. Some part of your nervous system knows that it is safe to let go because something older is still watching. This is not metaphor. It is biology. Throughout human history, sleep was risky. Predators, environmental dangers, uncertainty. If sleep required conscious control of breathing and heartbeat, it would never have been safe. So evolution separated responsibilities. The medulla took ownership of survival. Newer brain regions were allowed to rest. Even now, in modern bedrooms, your brain follows this ancient agreement. As night deepens, the medulla subtly adjusts breathing patterns. Slower, more regular, less influenced by emotion. You may notice this sometimes, that moment when breathing naturally becomes deeper. Not forced, not controlled, just different. That shift does not come from thinking. It comes from the medulla sensing that alertness is no longer required. The medulla also plays a role in how your body reacts to stress, sudden fear, sharp noises, unexpected movement. Those reflexive responses originate here. But at night, when the environment grows quieter, the medulla allows those reflexes to soften. It does not shut them off. It simply lowers the volume. This is why sudden noises can still wake you, but background sounds fade away. The medulla is selective. It filters threat, not meaning. It does not care about unfinished emails or future plans. It only cares about survival signals. This difference matters. When people struggle to sleep, they often blame their thoughts. But very often, the issue is not thinking. It is safety. The medulla evolved in a world where danger was physical, not abstract. When the body feels safe, the medulla signals stability. Breathing deepens, heart rate steadies, sleep becomes possible. This is why simple things like warmth, stillness, and quiet matter so much at night. They speak directly to ancient systems. You may not consciously register these signals, but the medulla does. It listens constantly. The medulla is also closely connected to another important structure nearby, the pons. Together, they form a bridge between wakefulness and sleep. They coordinate transitions, not sudden shifts, gradual ones. This is why falling asleep often feels like drifting, not dropping. The medulla does not rush. It has learned patience over millions of years. As humans evolved, new brain regions appeared on top of these older systems, but the medulla was never replaced. It was preserved. Even the most complex thoughts you have ever had depended on it, because without breathing, thought cannot continue. There is something grounding about this. No matter how complicated life becomes, your existence is still supported by simple rhythms. In, out, beat, pause. You do not need to manage these rhythms. They manage you. At night, this relationship becomes more apparent. As higher brain areas release control, the medulla's steady presence becomes the backbone of rest. You may notice moments when thoughts briefly disappear, not replaced by sleep yet, just quiet. Those moments are supported by the medulla's consistency. It holds space for awareness to fade without fear. This is one reason why sleep feels safe when it works well, because something ancient is guarding the essentials. In future parts, we will explore regions that think, feel, remember, and imagine, but all of them depend on this base. Without the medulla, there is no dream, no memory, no consciousness to return to in the morning. It is the quiet hero of the nervous system, never demanding attention, never seeking recognition, just working. As you continue listening, or as your attention drifts elsewhere, your medulla will continue doing exactly what it has always done. Maintaining balance, holding rhythm, allowing the rest of the brain to let go. If this slow exploration of the brain feels useful to you, you can gently support it by liking the episode or subscribing when it feels natural. It helps these calm stories continue without changing their tone. For now, there is nothing else required. The oldest part of your brain has everything under control. And as this part of the journey settles, we will soon move upward, toward the systems that decide when awareness stays awake and when it finally fades. Nothing needs to change as we continue. Your body can remain still or shift gently if it wants to. This part of the journey moves slightly upward into a region that acts less like a foundation and more like a transition. We are now moving into the systems that decide when you are awake and when you are allowed to drift. Between full alertness and deep sleep, there is a bridge, a space where awareness softens but does not disappear, a space most people pass through every night without noticing. This bridge is shaped by a collection of structures, often grouped together. One of the most important being the reticular formation. The reticular formation is not a single neat organ. It is a network, a diffuse web of neurons running through the brainstem and upward into higher regions. Its role is simple but powerful. It regulates arousal, not excitement, not emotion, arousal in the biological sense, how alert you feel, how responsive you are to the world, how easily your attention can be pulled outward. During the day, this system is active. It keeps your senses open. It maintains readiness. At night, its tone changes. To understand why this system exists at all, we again need to step back into history. Early animals lived in environments where constant vigilance was costly. Being alert all the time burned energy, but being unaware was dangerous. So evolution needed a way to adjust awareness, not just turn it on or off. The reticular formation emerged as that adjustment system. It learned to scan the environment broadly, rather than focusing on details. It listens for relevance, movement, sudden sound, change. If nothing important is detected, it allows alertness to drop. This is why you can sleep through familiar background noise, but wake instantly to an unfamiliar sound. Your ears may hear everything, but the reticular formation decides what reaches consciousness. It is a gatekeeper, not of information, but of importance. At night, this gatekeeper becomes selective in a different way. It lowers the threshold for rest. It tells the brain, slowly and repeatedly, that the environment is stable enough to let go. This is not a switch. It is a gradual persuasion. You may recognize this process. That feeling where your thoughts start to feel heavier, where focusing becomes harder, where attention slips, even when you try to hold on to it. That is not weakness. That is the reticular formation doing its job. As humans evolved, this system became more refined. It learned to integrate with newer brain regions. It began coordinating with emotional centers, memory systems, and eventually the cortex. This coordination is why stress can keep you awake. When emotional systems signal uncertainty or threat, the reticular formation stays active. It keeps alertness higher. It delays the descent into sleep. Again, this is not a flaw. It is protection. In ancestral environments, sleeping while anxious could be dangerous. The problem is that modern threats are abstract. Deadlines, social tension, future uncertainty. The reticular formation cannot distinguish between a physical danger and a psychological one. It responds to signals of importance, not logic. This is why night thoughts feel persistent. The system that decides whether to let go is still listening. As night deepens and sensory input reduces, the reticular formation begins to quiet its scanning. Its signals soften. Its influence fades gradually. This fading is what allows consciousness to thin. You may notice moments where you are still aware, but not actively thinking. Moments where images appear briefly, then dissolve. Moments where time feels stretched or unclear. These are not dreams yet. They are transitions. The reticular formation is easing its grip. It is also deeply connected to sleep cycles. It helps regulate when lighter sleep shifts into deeper sleep, when dreaming becomes more likely, when brief awakenings occur. Throughout the night, this system pulses gently, rising slightly, falling again. This is why you may wake briefly and not remember it. Awareness flickers without fully returning. This flickering is normal. It is healthy. The brain is checking in with the environment, then deciding it is still safe to rest. The reticular formation does not crave deep sleep. It craves appropriate sleep. It balances restoration with readiness. One of the most interesting aspects of this system is how little it demands from you. You cannot command it directly. You cannot reason with it, but you can influence it indirectly. Consistency, familiarity, reduced stimulation. These are signals it understands. That is why routines matter, why repeated nighttime environments feel comforting. The reticular formation learns patterns. When patterns repeat without threat, it relaxes more easily. As you lie here now, or as you continue listening, this system is already responding, not to the words themselves, but to the steadiness of them. A consistent tone, no sudden shifts, no urgency. These are subtle signals, and subtle signals are what ancient systems trust most. In later parts, we will explore the thalamus, which filters sensory information more precisely, and the cortex, which interprets meaning. But the reticular formation comes first. It decides whether the brain is even open for business. At night, its goal is not to shut you down. Its goal is to hand things over, to allow older rhythms and deeper processes to take over. As this part of the journey settles, your brain continues its quiet negotiation, staying alert enough to feel safe, relaxed enough to rest. There is no correct pace, no target state. The system knows how to drift. If you are finding value in this slow exploration, you can gently support it by liking the episode or subscribing whenever it feels natural. These small signals help keep this space available without changing its calm nature. For now, we let this layer fade into the background, just as it does every night. And next, we will move toward a structure that decides what the brain hears and what it allows to disappear into silence. If your attention has drifted a little since the last part, that is completely fine. We are continuing upward into a part of the brain that quietly decides what reaches you and what never quite makes it through. This part is called the thalamus. The thalamus sits deep in the center of the brain, not at the surface, not at the base, but tucked inside like a hub. If the brain were a city, the thalamus would not be a place you visit. It would be the central station. Everything passes through. Almost all sensory information travels through the thalamus before it reaches conscious awareness. Sound, touch, visual signals, movement information. The thalamus does not create these signals. It receives them, sorts them, directs them. This is one of the most important ideas to understand about sleep. You do not experience the world directly. You experience what the thalamus allows through. During the day, the thalamus is open, busy, routing information constantly. Light hits the eyes, sound vibrates the ears, signals stream inward. The thalamus decides where each signal should go, which region needs it, which can ignore it. At night, this process changes. But before we talk about night, we need to understand why the thalamus exists at all. Early nervous systems were simple. Signals traveled directly from sensors to muscles, react and move. As organisms became more complex, this direct wiring became inefficient. Too much information, too many signals. The thalamus evolved as a solution. Instead of everything going everywhere, information would pause briefly, be assessed, be redirected. This pause is tiny, milliseconds, but it is enough to decide relevance. Over millions of years, the thalamus became more refined. It developed specialized nuclei, each handling a different type of information. Vision here, sound there, touch elsewhere. But it never became a thinker. It remained a filter. This distinction matters. The thalamus does not care about meaning. It cares about routing. It does not interpret. It delivers. During the day, this delivery system is highly active. But as night approaches, something interesting happens. The thalamus begins to change how it operates. It does not shut down. It shifts mode. Instead of forwarding sensory information outward to the cortex, it begins to dampen those signals. This is why the world slowly feels quieter at night. Even if the environment has not changed, sounds lose their sharpness. Lights feel less intrusive. Touch feels more distant. This is not imagination. It is gating. The thalamus is reducing the flow. This reduction is essential for sleep. If every sound reached full awareness, sleep would be impossible. If every small movement demanded attention, rest would never happen. So the thalamus negotiates. Important signals are still allowed through. Sudden loud noises, unfamiliar sounds, but familiar, repetitive input fades. This is why you can sleep through the hum of a fan, but wake instantly to a new noise. The thalamus has learned what can be ignored. This learning happens over time, through repetition. At night, the thalamus becomes more conservative, more protective. It guards consciousness from overload. Another important role of the thalamus appears as sleep deepens. As the brain transitions into deeper stages, the thalamus begins to synchronize with slower brain rhythms. This synchronization creates sleep spindles, brief bursts of activity that help block external input. You do not feel these spindles, but they are working. They are like brief closures of the gate. Close, open, close again. Each closure protects the brain from waking. This rhythmic gating allows the cortex to disengage from the environment and focus inward. This is when memory consolidation becomes possible, when emotional processing deepens, when repair begins. The thalamus is not passive in this process. It actively supports it. It coordinates with other regions to maintain the boundary between inner and outer worlds. This boundary is important. Without it, dreams would be constantly interrupted. Deep sleep would fragment. The thalamus ensures continuity. Throughout human evolution, this function became increasingly valuable. As brains grew larger and more complex, sleep became more vulnerable. More information, more stimulation. The thalamus evolved alongside this complexity, learning to manage sensory flow more precisely. In modern life, this system is under constant pressure. Artificial light, continuous noise, screens, notifications. The thalamus was not designed for non-stop novelty. At night, when stimulation remains high, it struggles to reduce input. This is why darkness and quiet feel so powerful. They align with what the thalamus expects. When sensory input decreases naturally, the thalamus does not have to fight as hard. It can simply lower the gates. As you lie here now or continue listening, your thalamus is already adapting. The steady tone of sound, the lack of sudden changes, the predictability. These are signals of safety, and safety allows filtering. You may notice moments where sound feels farther away, where awareness narrows, where thoughts float without being anchored to sensation. That is the thalamus doing its night work, allowing the brain to turn inward. Later in this series, we will talk about dreaming, about memory, about emotional processing. None of that happens without this gatekeeper. The thalamus protects the inner world while the outer world fades. It does not erase reality. It postpones it. For a few hours each night, that postponement is essential. If this slow exploration continues to feel helpful, you can gently support it by liking the episode or subscribing when it feels right. These small gestures help keep this calm space available. For now, there is nothing else required. The gate is gently closing, and as it does, we will soon move toward the part of the brain that remembers, feels, and gives dreams their emotional color. If your thoughts have become softer or more scattered, that is not something to correct. We are moving into a part of the brain where emotion, memory, and meaning quietly meet. This region is often called the limbic system. It is not a single structure. It is a collection of connected areas deep within the brain, areas that developed after the brainstem, but before the thinking cortex became dominant. The limbic system sits beneath the surface, not visible from the outside, protected. Its role is not to analyze the world. Its role is to feel it. Within this system are structures like the amygdala and the hippocampus, each with its own purpose, each with its own history. The amygdala is involved in emotional significance. It helps determine whether something matters, whether it is safe, whether it should be remembered strongly. The hippocampus is involved in forming memories, not raw recordings, but experiences tied to context and emotion. Together, these structures shape how events are stored and recalled. They decide not just what you remember, but how it feels when you remember it. To understand why this system exists, we again look back in time. Early animals did not need abstract reasoning. They needed to learn from experience what led to safety, what led to danger, what patterns repeated. Emotion became a shortcut. Fear taught avoidance. Comfort taught return. The limbic system evolved to tag experiences with feeling, so the organism could respond faster next time. This was efficient, and it worked. As mammals evolved, this system became more sophisticated. It began linking emotion to place, time, and social connection. Memory was no longer just about survival. It became about relationships. At night, this system becomes more active, not louder, more present. During the day, the thinking brain often keeps emotional processing in check. It redirects attention outward. It prioritizes tasks. At night, that control relaxes. The limbic system is given space. This is why emotions often feel closer at night, why unresolved feelings surface, why memories appear without warning. The brain uses quiet to process meaning. The hippocampus, in particular, becomes busy during sleep. It replays fragments of the day. Not in order, not logically. It selects moments, emotional peaks, unresolved threads. These fragments are then shared with the cortex, where they are gradually integrated into long-term memory. This process does not feel like learning. It feels like drifting. Dreams often emerge from this exchange. The hippocampus offers images. The amygdala colors them with emotion. The cortex tries to make sense of them loosely. This is why dreams feel vivid but unclear, why they feel important but difficult to explain. The limbic system speaks in feeling, not language. During sleep, this is not a problem. It is an advantage. Emotions can be processed without needing explanation. Fear can soften. Joy can linger. Grief can be reorganized. This is one reason sleep helps emotional regulation. Without it, emotional responses remain sharp, unfiltered. The limbic system also plays a role in why certain thoughts appear at night. When attention is no longer directed outward, internal signals become louder. A memory you did not choose. A feeling you did not invite. These are not intrusions. They are attempts at completion. The brain is trying to resolve what was left open. This is why forcing thoughts away often backfires. The limbic system does not respond to commands. It responds to acknowledgement. At night, when the environment is still, acknowledgement happens naturally. As you lie here now or continue listening, your limbic system is active in subtle ways, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just sorting. It is revisiting, reassessing, softening edges. This process does not require effort. It happens best when attention is gentle. Over evolutionary time, this system became essential for social animals, understanding others, remembering relationships, predicting emotional outcomes. Sleep allowed this system to recalibrate, to release unnecessary intensity, to reinforce meaningful bonds. Modern life often interrupts this process. Constant stimulation leaves little quiet for emotional sorting. This is why night can feel emotionally heavy. The system finally has room to speak. Listening calmly, without reacting, is often enough. The limbic system does not need solutions. It needs space. As this part of the journey settles, emotions may feel closer or farther. Either is fine. There is no goal here. In the next part, we will move outward toward the newest layer of the brain, the part that plans, evaluates, and speaks in words, the part that often works hardest during the day and grows quiet at night. And as we approach it, you may notice that thinking itself begins to feel heavier. That is not resistance. It is rest approaching. If your awareness feels lighter now, or less anchored to specific thoughts, that is a natural place to be as we continue. We are moving slightly backward and downward again, toward a part of the brain that rarely gets attention, yet quietly supports almost everything you do. This part is called the cerebellum. The cerebellum sits at the back of the brain, tucked underneath the larger cerebral hemispheres. It does not think in words. It does not plan the future. It does not analyze meaning. Instead, it refines. The cerebellum is involved in coordination, balance, timing, and precision. It helps movements become smooth instead of clumsy. It helps actions feel automatic instead of effortful. When you walk without thinking, when you type without looking, when you reach for something without calculating distance, the cerebellum is at work. For a long time, scientists believed the cerebellum was only about movement. But over time, something interesting became clear. This structure is not just refining muscles, it is refining patterns. The cerebellum learns sequences, timing, flow. It takes repeated actions and turns them into something effortless. To understand why this matters for sleep, we need to look at its history. The cerebellum is an ancient structure. In fact, in many animals, it is proportionally larger than in humans. Fish, birds, and early mammals relied heavily on precise movement to survive. Swimming, flying, escaping. Their environments demanded accuracy. The cerebellum evolved to meet that demand. Over time, as brains grew larger and behavior became more complex, the cerebellum did not disappear. It adapted. It began assisting not only physical movement, but mental sequences as well. Patterns of thought, rhythms of attention, predictable routines. This is why habits feel smooth when they are learned. Why repeated actions require less conscious effort. At night, the cerebellum becomes quietly involved in a different way. During sleep, especially during certain stages, the brain replays patterns. Not just memories, but sequences. The cerebellum helps refine these replays. It smooths them, optimizes them, removes inefficiencies. This is why skills improve after sleep, why learning consolidates without practice. The cerebellum is adjusting timing behind the scenes. You may notice this sometimes when you wake up. A movement feels easier. A task feels more fluid. Nothing new was learned consciously, but something was refined. At night, the cerebellum works without instruction. It collaborates with memory systems, with motor areas, with sensory regions. It is not deciding what matters. It is making what matters smoother. There is something calming about this role. The cerebellum does not worry. It does not evaluate success or failure. It simply adjusts. This may be one reason why repetitive, rhythmic sensations feel soothing. Gentle movement, consistent sound, steady pacing. These patterns align with what the cerebellum understands best. It recognizes rhythm as safety. Evolutionarily, smooth rhythm meant predictability. Predictability meant survival. At night, when rhythms slow, the cerebellum follows. Breathing becomes more regular. Muscle tone decreases. Movements become minimal. The cerebellum supports this stillness. It reduces the need for correction. You may notice moments where your body feels heavy. Not tense, just settled. That heaviness is not fatigue. It is reduced adjustment. The cerebellum is saying, Nothing needs to be corrected right now. This also plays a role in why sleep paralysis can occur, briefly, during dreaming. The cerebellum and related systems reduce movement to prevent acting out dreams. Again, not as a flaw. As protection. Throughout evolution, this balance between dreaming and stillness mattered. Without it, sleep would be chaotic. The cerebellum helped maintain that balance. In waking life, we rarely thank it. But at night, its contribution becomes more noticeable. It helps the body become quiet without losing stability. As you lie here now or continue listening, your cerebellum is subtly adjusting posture. Micro movements, tiny corrections. You do not feel these, but they are happening. They allow you to remain still without discomfort. They allow the body to rest without effort. In later parts, we will move outward to the brain's newest layers, the parts involved in judgment, planning, and inner dialogue. But the cerebellum reminds us of something important. Not everything needs to be controlled to work well. Some systems function best when left alone. As this part of the journey settles, allow the idea that refinement can happen without attention. That improvement does not require effort. The brain knows how to smooth itself. And next, we will move toward the part of the brain that thinks about thinking itself, the layer that speaks in language, evaluates the self, and slowly powers down as night deepens. If thinking itself feels slightly heavier now, or less sharp, that is a natural place to be as we arrive at this next layer. We are moving outward to the newest part of the brain in evolutionary terms. The part most closely associated with planning, decision-making, and the sense of being a self. This is the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex sits at the very front of the brain, just behind the forehead. It is thin, complex, and highly connected. It did not appear suddenly. It grew slowly as human life became more social, more symbolic, and more future-oriented. This part of the brain is deeply involved in thinking about tomorrow, about consequences, about rules, about identity. When you weigh options, when you hold back an impulse, when you imagine how something might turn out, the prefrontal cortex is active. During the day, it works constantly, often without rest. It manages attention, suppresses distractions, maintains social behavior, keeps emotions in check. It is the part of the brain that asks, "What should I do next?" From an evolutionary perspective, this was a powerful addition. Early humans who could plan ahead had an advantage. Those who could predict outcomes survived longer. Those who could inhibit impulses cooperated better. So the prefrontal cortex expanded, but this expansion came with a cost. This part of the brain is energy hungry. It requires constant input, constant regulation. It does not run well indefinitely. At night, the prefrontal cortex begins to loosen its grip, not abruptly. Gradually, you may notice this as difficulty focusing late at night, as decisions feeling harder, as self-criticism softening or becoming less organized. This is not decline. It is recovery. The prefrontal cortex needs rest more than many other regions because it carries the weight of control. Sleep allows it to step back. As it does, other systems are allowed to take the lead. This shift is important. When the prefrontal cortex remains too active at night, sleep becomes difficult. Thoughts loop. Planning continues. Evaluation does not stop. This is why stress and overthinking interfere with rest. The brain has not yet reassigned responsibilities. Evolutionarily, this makes sense. In dangerous environments, planning through the night could be beneficial. But in safe conditions, it becomes unnecessary. The challenge of modern life is that the prefrontal cortex is constantly stimulated. Information, decisions, social feedback, it is rarely allowed to disengage. Sleep is when it finally gets permission. As night deepens, activity in the prefrontal cortex decreases. Logical sequencing weakens. Time perception changes. This is why dreams lack structure, why they jump between scenes, why contradictions feel acceptable. The prefrontal cortex is quieter, not gone, just less dominant. This quieting also allows emotional systems to process without interference. Without constant evaluation, feelings can be experienced without judgment. This is one reason why insight sometimes appears after sleep. The prefrontal cortex returns refreshed, less rigid, more flexible. As you lie here now, or continue listening, your prefrontal cortex may already be stepping back. You may notice that following long chains of thought feels unnecessary. That attention drifts without resistance. This is a healthy signal. The brain is reallocating energy. It is worth noting that this part of the brain matures slowly. In humans, it continues developing well into early adulthood. This long development reflects its complexity. It must learn social norms, cultural rules, long-term goals, but once developed, it also needs regular rest. Sleep is not optional for this system. It is maintenance. Without it, judgment becomes rigid. Emotional control weakens. Perspective narrows. The prefrontal cortex depends on sleep to remain flexible. At night, letting go of control is not laziness. It is cooperation with biology. As this part of the journey settles, thinking itself may feel less urgent, less demanding. There is no need to resolve anything. The part of you that worries about tomorrow is allowed to rest. In the next part, we will explore what happens when this control quiets and the brain's internal storytelling system comes forward, the part that fills the mind with wandering thoughts, memories, and imagined futures. And as we approach that, you may find that the boundary between listening and drifting becomes softer. That is exactly where this journey is meant to go. If the boundary between listening and drifting feels thinner now, that is exactly where this next part begins. We are moving into a network of the brain that becomes most noticeable when nothing in particular is being done. This is often called the default mode network. It is not a single structure you can point to. It is a pattern of activity, a conversation between several regions of the brain. This network becomes active when attention is no longer focused outward, when there is no task to complete, no problem demanding an answer, when the mind is allowed to wander. During the day, the default mode network is often suppressed. Tasks require focus. Attention is directed outward, but the moment you stop, the moment there is space, this network comes online. It is responsible for inner narration, for daydreaming, for remembering the past, for imagining the future. It is where the brain tells itself stories. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. Once survival became more stable, humans gained the ability to reflect, to simulate situations without acting them out, to learn from imagined outcomes. The default mode network evolved to support this internal rehearsal. It allows the brain to ask quiet questions. Who am I? What happened? What might come next? This network is deeply connected to memory systems and emotional centers. It pulls fragments from experience and arranges them loosely, not logically, narratively. This is why thoughts at night feel like stories rather than arguments. During the day, the prefrontal cortex often directs this network. It keeps the narration structured. At night, that direction relaxes. The default mode network becomes freer, less edited. This is why memories surface unexpectedly, why future scenarios appear without invitation, why imagined conversations replay. This is not the brain malfunctioning. It is the brain integrating. The default mode network does not care about efficiency. It cares about coherence. It tries to make sense of experience across time. At night, when external input is reduced and sensory gating increases, this network becomes dominant. You may notice thoughts drifting from one topic to another, not because you are unfocused, but because focus is no longer required. This drifting has a purpose. It allows the brain to link ideas that were never connected during the day. It allows emotional memories to soften. It allows identity to update quietly. This is also why trying to force silence often makes the mind louder. The default mode network resists control. It responds better to gentle attention. As sleep approaches, this network begins to fragment. Stories become shorter. Images blur. Narration loosens. Eventually, language itself fades. This is the transition into dreaming. The default mode network does not turn off. It changes form. Instead of inner speech, it offers images. Instead of logic, it offers feeling. This is why dreams feel familiar but strange. They come from the same system that creates waking thoughts, just without supervision. From an evolutionary standpoint, this was useful. Dreaming allowed emotional rehearsal without physical risk. It allowed memory integration without distraction. The default mode network became the stage for this internal theater. At night, when you find yourself replaying moments from the past or imagining futures that may never happen, this network is active. It is not asking you to solve anything. It is updating the story of who you are. This story does not need to be perfect. It only needs to continue. As you lie here now or continue listening, your default mode network is gently weaving. Some threads are emotional. Some are visual. Some are vague. You do not need to follow them. Letting them pass is often enough. As sleep deepens, these threads loosen further. Eventually, they no longer form sentences, only impressions. This is where awareness thins. This is where the brain stops narrating and begins resting more deeply. If you find this exploration meaningful, you can gently support it by liking the episode or subscribing whenever it feels natural. These quiet signals help this space continue. For now, allow the stories to soften. There is nothing to conclude, and in the final part of this journey, we will step back and look at how all of these systems work together when the brain truly rests, where repair happens, where balance returns, and where the night quietly does its work. This is the final part of our journey, and there is nothing new to learn here. Only things to notice as they settle into place. Up to now, we have moved through the brain piece by piece. Ancient structures, emotional centers, systems of attention and control, networks that tell stories when the world grows quiet. But the brain does not experience itself in parts. It works as a whole. Sleep is the moment when that wholeness becomes visible. When you are awake, different systems compete for influence. Attention pulls outward. Thoughts demand resolution. Emotions rise and fall. At night, the competition softens. The oldest systems take the lead. Breathing steadies. Heart rhythm settles. The medulla maintains life without effort. The systems of alertness loosen their grip. The reticular formation stops scanning for importance. The thalamus lowers the gate. The world fades gently. With sensory input reduced, the brain turns inward. Memory systems begin their quiet work. The hippocampus revisits fragments of the day, not to judge them, only to place them. Emotional centers adjust intensity. What felt sharp may soften. What felt heavy may become lighter by morning. The cerebellum refines patterns, movements, habits, sequences learned without awareness. Nothing dramatic happens here, only small adjustments, tiny corrections. The prefrontal cortex steps back, planning dissolves, self-evaluation fades, control rests. In this space, the default mode network shifts shape. Stories lose structure. Language loosens. Images float without direction. Dreams emerge not as messages to decode, but as expressions of integration. This is the brain doing what it evolved to do. For millions of years, sleep was not optional. It was survival. Brains that could not rest became rigid. Emotions stayed sharp. Learning stalled. Brains that slept reorganized themselves. Even now, in a modern world that rarely slows, the brain still carries that ancient rhythm. It does not ask permission to rest. It waits for opportunity. As you lie here now, or as your attention drifts further, that opportunity is already present. You do not need to fall asleep. You do not need to try. Sleep is not something the brain does because it is commanded. It is something the brain does when the conditions feel right. Understanding this often removes effort. There is nothing you need to fix tonight, nothing you need to solve before rest is allowed. The brain knows how to take care of itself. This journey through its parts was never meant to keep you awake. It was meant to remind you that rest is built into your biology. If you found this exploration comforting, you can gently support it by liking the episode or subscribing whenever it feels natural. These quiet gestures help keep these calm stories available without changing their tone. For now, let the brain continue its work without observation. Let thoughts fade if they want to. Let images drift if they appear. The systems that have carried you through every day of your life are still here, still working, still steady. And whether you remain aware or drift into sleep, the brain will continue doing what it has always done. Quietly, patiently, through the night.